Hi everybody, my name is Samantha Ballard and I'm a graduate assistant and clinical mental health counseling intern at Student Counseling Services. For the last semester, I have been running a grief group on campus, and so I thought grief might be a good topic to talk about during these really weird times. Grief kind of seems like a weird topic to talk about for this, but um, we don't grieve only for people that we've lost. We can also grieve for things that we've lost, opportunities that we've lost. And so, as we're having to stay home and not participate in things or have events that we plan to, especially really big events in our lives, it can be really hard, and we might actually experience grief for some of those. So things that I'm talking here are like, if you're not going to be able to have that graduation ceremony when you think you should be. It could even be, time with loved ones. Since we're, isolating and that kind of thing, we don't get to see our loved ones as often as we might want to. It could be events like baby showers, like kids' birthdays, weddings that are having to be canceled or postponed because of these really weird times and, the safety of people. So one thing that I just want to tell everybody is that it's okay to have feelings very similar or actual grief for these things. That's very normal. And so I just want to talk a little bit about the stages of grief. And what I like to actually discuss is more of the tasks of grief. I feel like we're all pretty familiar with the Kubler-Ross stages of grief, the 5 stages of grief. So that's like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But these were actually created for people who were dying. So grieving themselves, really. And so the process of grieving others or other things other than ourselves can look a little bit different than this 5-stage model that we've seen a lot. So in the early 90s, a guy by the name of J.W. Warden came up with what he called the tasks of mourning. So this graphic on the screen here is the tasks of grief, which is based off of his work. And I think this is a little more concrete and more applicable to people who have lost loved ones or things, in our case, that we're talking about right now, and not necessarily grieving themselves. This is also referred to as the tier model, so hence the tier-shaped of the graphic. But first here we have to accept the reality of the loss. And that can be really hard. Like I mentioned earlier, times right now are just really stinking weird. Not many of us, if any of us, have ever gone through anything like this. The only reference we really have are movies and other media about, like apocalypse or pandemics or that kind of thing. So it's really just new territory for everybody. So this idea of accepting the reality of things not happening the way, we wanted them to or think that they're supposed to can be really hard. So this first task here, the T, can be pretty difficult to deal with in itself. So moving on to the E there, that experience the pain and loss. So this one is, I think, one of the most important of these tasks, only because this is one of the tasks that I think we skip a lot in just grief of losing others and that kind of thing too. We don't let ourselves experience the pain of the loss. It's much easier to kind of shove it down and not think about it. But until we really let ourselves kind of experience that, we're going to be stuck in that task, and we're not going to be able to do the rest of these effectively. Now, I do think it's important to note that when we're letting ourselves experience the pain of the loss, that's not to say to let that pain and those feelings overwhelm us with that. which is where grief can really be tricky. So if you are letting yourself experience that pain and you do feel yourself getting overwhelmed, I encourage you to do some, self-care, whether that's, reach out to loved ones. I know in times like these, that's kind of difficult, but we do have technology, give them a phone call. When I'm upset, I call my mom. So whether that person for you is your mom or any other source of support that you have, give them a call, and just, let them support you that way. That could also look like, doing another activity that you enjoy for self-care. So that could be exercise, that could be reading, that could be any number of things. So just know what you need and what works best for you in those situations. I think it's also good to note that um, any of these tasks, or like the stages we talked about earlier, there are no time limits and there is no expected way to deal with this. Everybody's going to deal with grief differently. So just know that however you're doing it, however you're dealing with it, as long as you're taking care of yourself, you're doing it the right way. And so once you really let yourself really kind of experience that pain, in as much as, when you think about it and it doesn't quite hurt as much, then I think that's really where you start to move on to the rest of the tasks here. So, adjust to the new environment without the lost person, or the lost event or the lost opportunity that you had, and finally reinvesting in the new reality without that. So I hope some of you were able to find this helpful. If you or a fellow student is experiencing grief and having a really hard time of it, whether from, a lost opportunity, a lost event, or that kind of thing, or even, the loss of a loved one, give Student Counseling Services a call. Our number is 254-968-9044. These are some really weird times, and so I cannot stress this enough. Please, please take care of yourselves. Self-care is so important. So good luck with the rest of your semester and stay well.